Okay, great. And we're live here. We're sitting with Matthew Gardner, who's one of the founders of Synchronicity.
Yep.
And we'll get into Synchronicity and the events that you guys have at a later point. And the title of this podcast is N.L.P and Leadership. And just to let the audience know, I first met Matthew at a BACD event. You were coming to speak, and I used to frequent the sessions that they have. Very informative sessions. So anyone who's out in Durham, I recommend checking out the BACD events that they have. And then we caught up for coffee after that, and then you told me a little bit about the synchronicity programs that you have, and how you found that it was important for people to step up into their communities and act as leaders and engage themselves and their businesses and their services, and so to experience exponential growth from that. So I wanted to tie that in, especially with the events you do, into a focus of a topic which I said is NLP and leadership.
Yeah.
And you've got experience with that. You've got techniques. You've got some studies that you've done, which we'll get into as well. So if we can start off, what would you say from your experience with working through your clients and through people and through the community events that you do, would you cite as being the main difference between a leader and a follower? You can actually, on the flip side, look at a whole bunch of common traits and elements that exist that, both can be hardworking, both can show up to work on time, those sort of things. But I'm sure there's one thing that you might personally find is that main essence that differentiates that. And second thing I wanted to get into, if you can touch base as well, is there's an old adage that says, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And tying into NLP, which is linguistic programming, right, which is programming the mind. How does that play into that sentence and that quote? Sorry, two very different things I've thrown at you.
Sure, yeah.
If you can go ahead.
That's great. So yeah, the first one being, what's the difference between a leader and a follower?
Yeah.
And what, from my perspective, what would be maybe the one thing that differentiates the two? I like that focus, number one, of like, what is that one thing? And that might even be the answer might even be within the question, because I think leadership is all about having a single point of focus and being committed to that and being consistent with it every day.
Yeah.
I think that everyone in some right is a leader in their life in some way, shape, or form, but what causes you to look up to someone and see them as being like charismatic or energized towards a certain outcome, and why would you want to join forces with them? I think one of the keys is alignment in that sense, is that the idea that when working with someone, it's either you're working on your own dream or you're helping someone else build theirs. But if their dream is aligned with what your dream is, then why not work together to achieve it? That's really what synchronicity is all about, or we call it Synchronicity Durham out here in the Durham region.
Yeah.
And we just decided, hey, we want our vision to be making good communities better. And so we're kind of taking the leadership role in that idea in our own way. I mean, there's lots of other organizations that do that sort of thing, but this is our own unique concept of being at the right place at the right time with the right people through synchronicity, and then making good communities better. And so we have a lot of alignment with other community leaders or people that are not necessarily in a leadership role, but the concept of Synchronicity Durham is to allow everyone to realize that they are a leader within the community. That's really just a choice to be a leader. But if you want to maintain that type of leadership capacity in your own right, consistency, I think, is the key role. It's not so much about doing things all at once for like, a big chunk. Like going to the gym is a good analogy, right? Like you don't go to the gym for like 6 hours and then don't go for another 2 weeks. If you work out for 15, 20 minutes a day over a long period of time, you're going to get greater benefit than doing it all at once. Correct. Or like you don't eat all 3 meals at the beginning of the day, you eat it throughout the day, because the idea is that consistency to spread it out. And through that, consistent effort, despite what challenges may come up, and maintaining that focus on that one thing, I think that's what really defines a leader.
Okay. No, that's great. And you're saying that, so the answer is tied into the question a little bit. And if you get into the concept of leadership, I mean, personally, I think you can really only maybe lead yourself, and you can lead people. Essentially, that's all you're doing in leadership, is either leading yourself and leading people. And even people who aren't in a leadership position, so people who are just sort of, say, employed, say in a position, they can actually lead themselves, right? I mean, they've got their boss who tells them what to do, what the functions of the job are. But then that boss, his or her job function is to lead people, right? To get the mandate of the company done. So what would you say is if someone in that position wanted to make that one switch, what is the one trait or the one mindset they would have to adopt to go from either a follower to a leader, an employee into management? What is that one switch that has to turn on?
I'd say integrity. Really, and everyone has their own definition. So for me, the basic concept of integrity is following through on what you say you're going to do. Because automatically people respect you for that. Particularly if someone isn't achieving it at the same level as you, then you become a role model for them. And I don't mean integrity in any kind of pretentious way. I just mean authentically saying like, hey, we said we're going to do something and we either do it or we acknowledge that we're not able to and we create a new agreement around doing that. Whether
so having honest accountability.
Yeah. And then integrity on a larger scale for me incorporates, in a sense, different elements of life. So I like to look at it like a triangle, or I don't know if a triage is the right word, but like mind, body, spirit, basically. So you got the mind, body, spirit. So integrity to me is about having that kind of as your compass. Everything that I do in life has a mind thing involved, a mental thing involved, a physical thing involved, taking action, and then an emotional / spiritual element to it as well. And I kind of combine emotion and spirituality in the sense that we're drawing in our inspiration and enthusiasm from like a higher concept than just our physical self. And that kind of acts as a driving engine to move things forward. So to me, integrity as a basic, just to kind of recap, number one, you do what you say you're going to do, or if you can't, you create a new agreement. And then number two is you have those key elements working together harmoniously. So like mind, body, spirit in the case that I'm speaking.
Correct. No, that's great. The second part of the question is totally different from the first. The old adage, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I even remember as a child listening to that, remember not feeling very comfortable with that sentence, because at some point I used to think that, words can actually hurt. And in some situations, they can actually hurt stronger than sticks and stones can. If you give it the power to, right? And there's the whole school of thought of that. So neuro-linguistic programming, which sort of ties into that, because if you're programming the language of the brain, which is the concept of N.L.P, right? The words that are incoming are automatically programming the brain, right? And you have control over that. So first off, it begins with the awareness, so you know what is incoming, right? And then you can make those adjustments, and then you can sort of take it and change the result to the goal that you want. How powerful do you think that adage resonates with you? And if you can speak tying N.L.P into leadership, how we can begin to start to program ourselves to be leaders.
Sure, yeah. So the old adage, sticks and stones break my bones, words can never hurt me. I mean, I'm someone who grew up with a lot of like sensitivities around what people thought about me, what people said to me. I take it to heart, I take it personally, all that sort of thing. So absolutely, if you give people the power to do that, and I mean, when we're growing up, we're kind of trained to do that. We give our power away to authorities, and most adults are still doing that in some capacity. So it's kind of human nature to do that. So I think for me anyway, I just hit a turning point where I realized like, hey, I'm not getting the life experience I want when I give that power away. So the key element I think is like kind of like a wake up call or a wake up switch, saying like, you know what these folks are saying, it's not working for me. Either it's making me feel awful and therefore I don't want to live that kind of life, or it doesn't really make sense, because there's a lot of people that are successful out there, and then when we look at their stories, they've become immune to the rejection that the world has offered them in some ways, and then they use it as a driving engine to move their life forward in some respects, or they just ignore it and do what they're passionate about. Like there's a lot of different, and everything in between that basically. So I think, how do you kind of apply NLP to reframing words is, number one, you got to understand human nature, right? Like, people are just, there's a phrase in NLP, projection is perception, or perception is projection, kind of whatever way you want to say it. But basically, what you perceive in your inner world is what you project to your outer world. So if you have a basic understanding of that, it becomes a lot easier to see that, like, what other people think is not a fact. In fact, like, if we actually look at, like, what are the facts in a situation or circumstance, it would probably be entirely different than what people's perceptions are of a situation. So there's that's a core tenet. The other core tenet that I really like, which is from, like, the book, The Four Agreements, is not to take anything personally. So that's a reframe, right? In NLP, there's a technique or a process called reframing something, which basically you have a picture, it's in one frame. In that particular frame, it's highlighting certain elements of the picture, and you say, you know what? I wonder if I took that same picture but put it into a different frame, and what would it look like? What kind of elements would start to stand out? So the reframe is, like, not taking things personally. Why? Because perception is projection, and people are just sharing their own history with you. And most people are just living in the past anyway, right? That's another concept with NLP, is that it grants you the ability to clear your past so that you're operating from more of a blank slate or an empty space, where you're fresh to perceive in the moment what's happening and then create a future for yourself from that standpoint. But most people, in my experience anyway, and certainly through the body of research in the neurolinguistic programming field, is that people carry their past experiences with them, and over time, particularly if they don't empty out, that continues to filter through more and more, and that kind of dark glass that maybe started off okay, gets darker and darker over time. And by the time someone's 40, 50, 60, some of their perceptions, particularly the more emotionally charged issues in their life, they're really not getting a clear perception or factual perception of what's going on. So I think if you're going to apply NLP to leadership, you have to understand some of these core ideas. And just scratching on the surface, there's about, I think, over a dozen different tenets in NLP and how it kind of applies to how we perceive reality.
Okay. So if you don't mind, before we get to that second part,
yeah,
we can just go back a bit and sort of zoom in more.
Yeah.
So, like you said, we know that if someone insults us, we have the power to either accept it or not accept, right? That energy.
Yeah.
Even though today we've heard about it, the theory that we should not accept that.
Yeah.
If we're in a situation, that response or that insult still hurts us, rather emotionally.
Yeah.
Why is that? And even though we know what to do about it, why is it that we still allow it to hurt us? Or is the concept that, okay, let it hurt us, accept it, embrace it, and then work on removing it?
Yeah, I think I think that could be a starting point, right? Like if you just have the awareness that, like, I have the power to choose how I perceive what's happening. I kind of look at it like, again, going to the gym. So you're building your armor up, so to speak, and not to say that you need an armor to, like, defend yourself. I don't mean it that way, but you're building your muscle mass neurologically and physiologically and biologically to be stronger, to be more resilient in that capacity. And like, the thing I like about leadership and the field of sales, which I'm also involved in, is that, like, you have to develop that thick skin or that immunity to rejection, because people are going to say no. But again, if you realize, like, a no is actually great because it helps you eliminate pathways, and then you can actually focus on the pathway that's meant for you. But in my case, I would say keeping the bigger picture in mind is fundamental to not allowing people to bring you down in what their perceptions are of you. Because if you know that you're always on the right track and you're always following through on what's most exciting to you and inspirational to you, that part of that pathway are the people that are going to say, no, you can't do that. Or, particularly when we grow up as kids, you might get picked on in school, or, there might be bullies involved, and then that can continue in the workplace for some people. But if you're really driven by a vision and you're really taking action on your mission or the pathway of how you're going to achieve that vision, then yeah, you might still get caught up in the emotion of people's ideas and stuff like that from time to time, but there's this greater force compelling you to move forward and to get over it. And then I think leaders have an easier time of getting over those things, because the more you start serving other people, the more you realize, like, hey, I can't let what this one person thinks affect how I'm dealing with these other 12 people that are actually invested in me.
Correct, yeah. And I guess you don't want to be without any empathy as well, right? So in a moment like that, when someone insults you, you do feel it. Ideally, you would not want to feel it, but maybe there is some lesson to be learned by feeling it, right? Like
100%. Yeah. I mean, if you are getting triggered by something, there's always a lesson there from my perspective. Like a key question, a couple different ways to approach it is asking why, 2 or 3 times. Like, what if this is bringing up something in me, like, why is that? What's it linking into? Now, that can be good to do with yourself, but it's much more effective to do with someone else. So
right.
If there's something that's like really on your mind, you could just sit down with almost anyone that's willing to help and just have them ask you the question, like, so why do you think that's a trigger for you? And then you give an answer, and then they say, okay, they dive a little deeper. Why is that an issue for you? And then dive a little deeper. Now, okay, like, why is that, or what's most important about that to being an issue for you? And the more you get to the root of it, you start to realize, maybe it doesn't make that much sense. As you unravel it, the moment you hit a point where that previous trigger no longer makes sense to you, then it dissolves, and then you could experience that same situation again and again, but it will no longer have the effect because the subconscious link has been broken.
Correct.
Yeah.
And leaders, and keeping in key with high performance athletes or entertainers or anyone who's on a stage format, who's responding to an audience, they do get nervous every time they go up. It's not something that goes away. When rejection does happen, even to them at that level, they still feel those small pains of rejection. And it's not like because they are leaders on that capacity that they don't feel these things. They're human, first of all. The career comes second. So it's just how you handle dealing with these things, right? That gives you the control and gives you the power to get the result that you're after anyway.
I'd say 100%. I mean, obviously you develop that immunity to it over time. But like, if you just look to what the bigger picture is, like, it's not about me. It's not about you. If we let go of that egotistical view of being selfish and self-absorbed, and realize, hey, like, I'm in this for the greater good of everyone involved in serving this community that I've created, then that's definitely a foundation. But there's lots of other techniques within N.L.P that a lot of these like leaders use, politicians and things of that nature, and other CEOs, executives, business leaders, that if you are carrying around something, you can kind of do a bit of an exercise, a process to help alleviate that from your mind. Like in the body of N.L.P that I was trained in, there's something called timeline therapy, which, if used correctly, can help you let go of past emotions, kind of empty out your bucket, so to speak.
So what's a working example of something like that?
So the idea of like something like timeline therapy is you could identify, like, if someone's having an issue of anger, for example, and like they're like, man, this past week I've had a lot of triggers for anger, then you can run through this process where you'll go back to like previous experiences of anger, and then even into potentially early childhood, or to like something that might have a genetic link for it, or some people believe in past lives, so you could even like go into that sort of thing. And the idea is to let go of those emotions and learn the lessons that were originally associated with them, and then the deeper you can get to the actual root cause of that original source of anger, then it starts to it starts to release or unlock or unblock this kind of chain of emotional links in your subconscious mind. So you're no longer carrying around these emotional weights with you.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's funny to know that, I mean, this is getting to the realm of psychology, and a lot of people think you have to be really advanced in the level of psychology to achieve these results, but really you don't. If you just know the few basic core aspects of of the N.L.P teachings.
Yeah.
And then if you apply it to the result that you want, you can very easily attain it, right?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like flicking on a light switch or driving a car, right? Like you don't have to understand how electricity works to use a light switch. You don't have to understand how a motor is put together in a vehicle in order to press the button and turn on the ignition and start driving. So 100%, if you just know a few basics and practice them every day consistently, then that's enough to start seeing the transformation. And I think you build on that. Like I believe it's the University College of London that established a study that it takes on average about 66 days to form a new habit. So if you maintain that consistency for like 3 months at least, so that's why when you're picking those core ideas, pick something that you know you can maintain for that period of time.
Correct.
And then you instill it as a new habit or a new behavior. And then there's obviously techniques in N.L.P that can help accelerate that as well. But at the end of the day, I think that where N.L.P is leading you is to realize that everything's a choice. And if you want to change your behavior, that's always within your power to do so. If you want to change your perception, it's always within your power to do so.
Sure.
And just to take action on that in the way that excites you the most.
Correct, yeah. Okay, so say I'm in a position, I'm a follower, and I want to move into the leadership category.
Yeah.
What would you say from your experience are the first 3 things you would work on?
Yeah.
And associate the teachings of N.L.P into that?
Cool. So straight away, you want to reframe that for yourself, right? Because everyone's already a leader. So you want to bring awareness as to where are you a leader in your life,
Correct.
right? Like how, if you're single living at home and, you don't have any responsibilities, you're still leading yourself in some way. So identify some core ways that you're leading your own life. But if you have kids, if you have animals, if you have a family, even if you have a job, are there any elements of that there's a leadership role taking place? If you're in your role at work and you're strictly at entry level and you're just taking orders, but are you ever leading customers to make an excellent purchase to better their lives? Or how are you leading? Even the little elements, you don't have to look at it like how am I a leader in my life big picture, but every single day what little steps am I taking to be a leader? And that would probably be the second one after you have awareness of how you already are a leader. Number 2 is like, how can I take it to the next level? How can I implement little next action steps into my life where I'm expressing a leadership capacity in a greater way? So you're now becoming more conscious of it. And the 4 steps of learning that are taught in N.L.P is first, unconscious incompetence. So you don't know what you don't know, which is kind of like where that question comes from, almost like, I'm a follower, how do I become a leader? Well, did you know that you're actually already a leader in some ways? And then that's level 2. Now you're consciously incompetent, so you know that you don't know. So now you realize, oh wow, I didn't know that I was a leader, but now I do know. So now you can become consciously competent, which is step 3, and bring the awareness to like how I've been a leader, and then bring awareness as to how I can accelerate that each and every day moving forward. And then the final stage, unconscious competence, is where it now becomes a natural behavior, which again, that 66-day period is kind of what you're looking at. And that would lead me into the third idea of consistency. Just do that. Just be like, you know what, for the rest of my life, or at least for the next 66 days, I'm going to look at least once a day for a way that I can be a leader in a greater way. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to reflect on how I was a leader that day.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you're saying 3 things. First thing, know that there are some areas in your life that you're currently leading yourself in. Mm-hmm. And even if it's a small percentage, it's at least there. So that gives you the confidence to make that first step. Second thing is become aware of the things that you don't know, that you need to know.
Yeah, and how can you implement it daily? So like the little ways you can become a leader today, like maybe you're walking home from work or whatever, and you notice like there's someone that could use a hand carrying some groceries. And in the past, you might have just ignored them and let them kind of sort it out on their own. But you realize, hey, whenever that's happened, I've always had an inspiration to maybe help. So you take action on that excitement or that inspiration. That would be a way of being a leader, just a little thing like that. Or holding even something a little smaller, holding a door for somebody, right? Like I allowed that person to have an experience, and therefore I took a leadership role in that circumstance.
Correct. And if you look at it N.L.P wise, you've just told the brain something that you want it to do. So you recognized, you became aware that you weren't as much of a leader as you wanted to be, but you currently had some capacity. And then you told the brain, these are the things we're going to work on. And then you use that for, like you're saying, 66 days to maintain consistency and get a result.
Yeah.
So you're actually programming the brain to achieve these results. And then a subset facet of N.L.P is also to use particular word choices, right?
Sure.
When doing this, to sort of say positive words rather than negative words, like I can versus I can't, or I will rather than I will try, or things like that, right? So that could be another thing you can get into during this process.
I think that's a good starting point for sure, right? Like whatever motivates you. There's certainly a power in words to a certain degree. I mean, eventually I think you break out of that belief system too. Like words don't matter until they do matter, or you could kind of reverse it. Like words only have power for as long as you allow them to have power, because we just go back to that analogy or that adage that you said about the sticks and stones. So I think it's important to be conscious of the words you're choosing, and depending on certain situations. Sometimes words are more critical in some circumstances, whereas other circumstances it's more important that you just have an intention, right? So like with that in mind, absolutely positive self-talk's great, but it's got to come from an authentic place too. So I don't think you want to gloss things over. Like if you're feeling negative about something, don't try and force yourself to feel positive about it. There's a lot of techniques within N.L.P, and then there's the field of energy psychology, which is, I'd say, closely linked, also something I've been trained in, where you can actually use some different techniques to help move that negative energy through your body more quickly, and then naturally arrive at a positive affirmation. And if you think of the word affirmation, you're just affirming what is true. So it's not about lying to yourself, it's about discovering what is true and just recognizing that it's true about yourself.
Correct. I mean, you have capacity to use these techniques, but use it where it's necessary and where appropriate. And don't sweep anything under the rug.
Yeah. Like if you're building a house and you need a hammer to put a nail in a piece of wood, you use a hammer, right? You don't necessarily take out a sledgehammer to drive in one nail, right? That's too much. It's not the right tool. So, with all the tools available within the N.L.P tool belt, you want to know when to use the right one at the right time, and fundamentally, just coming back to that one thing, like what's most important in this situation in terms of an outcome and what I want to experience, and that'll generally help you arrive at what you need to do in order to make that a possibility or a probability or an actuality for yourself.
Sure. Wow, amazing. We've got a few minutes left. I just quickly want to get into the Synchronicity passion project that you're doing. This interview is actually hard for me, and I'll tell you why, because this is a subject both you and me are very passionate about. You've actually done a lot of work in this field. I've done some reading from my past time with Tony Robbins and all of that. And each question, each sentence that I get into, we can sort of branch into different tangent conversations from each sentence. Like, that's the weight of vocabulary that you have in this field. So I've tried to, hopefully for our listeners, tried to bring something together into a simple system that hopefully can be practical enough that you can implement. But please excuse the vastness of the subject that Matthew and me are just trying to scratch the surface on. The Synchronicity projects, you started this in Durham. It's a passion project. It's to get citizens, government people, and business individuals together.
Right? Well, we reshaped it a little bit. So like our vision is about making good communities better. Synchronicity Durham, making good communities better. And then our mission, or as to how we accomplish that, is about collaborating within each level of the community, and then bringing together open-minded citizens and empowering them with the tools and resources to achieve their greatest dreams, goals, and passions. So N.L.P is kind of one of those tool sets that people can utilize to accomplish that. But the biggest component is collaboration. So like our motto is connect, create, celebrate. So it's all about people, putting people first. And from that, we create our passion projects or our businesses and what have you. And then we celebrate our success upon results, but also along the way.
Sure. Okay. Amazing. And if people want to find out more about these events, so where can they go?
They can go to synchronicitydurham.com. That'll take them to our meetup page. And if people kind of look through the meetups, they'll see past meetups. They'll probably see our upcoming meetups. And the other way is to email me, events@synchronicitydurham.com.
Okay, perfect. And any other social media if people want to follow you
based on the Matthew David Gardner or Matthew D. Gardner.
Okay.
They can find me on Facebook is probably the best way.
Okay, amazing. Thanks again for this podcast, this interview. I've been waiting to do this with you for a while now. And I'm going to definitely check you out at your events. I've been to your past events. They're great, so I encourage people to come check it out. And follow Matthew on his social media as well. Anyone looking to better themselves in the leadership field or just in other fields to do with hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, or just general leadership skills and attributes that you want to use to better your team or even yourself as you find new challenges coming into life. And follow Matthew, and he's got some good tips and tricks that he'll share with you guys for sure.
Awesome.
Once again, thanks for doing this, and I'm sure I'll see you on another podcast as well.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon.
Okay, pleasure. Thanks.